and welcome. If you're just joining us, this is week 5 of our quarter, and the question tonight is, what is love? And I'd like to take a few moments before we get started just to talk a little bit about where we've been together. It's kind of early to leave. I'm sure they'll be back. But, okay, looking back at our previous weeks together, and I'm speaking primarily to you students, it seems to me that we have frequently been confronted by the challenges of the university, but at the same time, by its possibilities. And that has taken place both in the context of asking the question, what is a university? And as well in the moment where we come together on any other given week to ask experts in their different fields to come together to build a kind of alchemy of connection between them. It's a big ask. And as you know, UCLA has some of the most extraordinary professors, researchers, artists, scholars, activists in the world. And each of our guests is masterful in their disciplinary perspective. And yet we're asking something new of them, to move horizontally between what they know and, in a sense, what they don't know, which is one another. We're asking for something here in this room more than expertise. We're asking for curiosity, interest, and I'd even say vulnerability. And that's a big ask, and I can say for sure, everyone who agrees to be here agrees out of generosity. So tonight, I want to talk for a moment about generosity and love. You might have noticed, those of you who have been here week after week, the music when you enter. Some of you are looking at one another. Well, that is carefully curated in response to the week's question by Kylie Kerrigan. It's a gift. It's a small act of love. It doesn't need to happen, but we're creating together. When I think about teaching's a little bit of a, I'm not always sure I want to call myself a teacher. I had a choreography teacher when I was in college at Sarah Lawrence who said, you can't teach choreography, all you can do is meddle. And she said she was a meddler. And so I like to think about teaching as a kind of loving meddling, like I'm going to get in your way until you know better what you're doing or what you want to do. So I think that meddling or teaching in the best of times is an act of love. It's a gift. The consumer part of the university is always there, but it falls away for that moment of listening to one another and helping each other to be the best we can be. When I first mentioned to Anne-Marie Burke the idea for 10 questions, she rushed toward it in a full embrace, not to me, to the idea. Through her efforts and vision, it became so much more than I could have imagined. And here we are, an idea because of a collaboration realized. The commitment to work together to create a class and simultaneously a public event where the rest of you could all be here that would be founded on conversations and that would invite you to have conversations with each other online and in small rooms, to become, in a sense, a hothouse for the combination of intellect and heart. That idea, that commitment was an act of love. I'd like to think that. And sometimes when one works together with colleagues to create, think of your artist collaborators. Think of your partners in whatever creative act, growing a family. We fall in love with one another in the sense that it is that thrill, that gift of shared ideas and sweat toward the realization of something, that shared creative enterprise, that, I think, is an act of love. Someone in this class said, out of all the questions we've had so far, this one might be the most challenging. Well, we won't hold tonight's guests responsible for summarily answering the question, what is love? But rather, we'll ask them to help us thicken our sense of what love is from the depth of their work and with one another. Tonight's question invites us here in this great place of learning in the university to be one another's guides, bringing together the formality of an institution with the urgency of our lives together. Every week I like to quote some of the students in the class, and here are a few of the thoughts that came from you all. Love is acceptance of someone's differences. Love is when you truly care about someone or something. The more love people experience, the kinder they tend to be. Love is being emotionally compelled to protect a person, an idea, an animal, a social cause, or a community. Someone else wrote, passion, attraction, instinct, friendship. Someone else wrote, love is not romance. Wise. So, I'm not an expert. We describe falling in love, but at what point do we know that we are truly experiencing feelings of love? And can we ever know this? And this. I pretty much love my phone based on the amount of time I spend on it. And I can't imagine my life as being as efficient without it. But I also love my teddy bear, Paddington, and that's way different because Paddington has a name and a face. I'd give up 5 phones to keep Paddington safe. You know who you are. So I'd like to ask you in a moment to join me in welcoming our guests, and then I will take a moment to share a very brief biography of them, but there's more in your program, so if you didn't get enough, you can get more there. I just want to introduce everyone to you before we get started. Come on out, please. Okay, so this is Massimo Ciavolella.
Very good.
A professor of Italian and comparative literature at UCLA, where he holds the Franklin D. Murphy Chair in Italian Renaissance Studies and is also director of the Center for Medieval and Renaissance Studies.
Not any longer. Stopped, finished in June.
Okay, co-edited several books, several of which deal directly with issues of love and love sickness.
That's true.
Covered.
David Roussève, my dear friend and colleague, is a Guggenheim Fellow, an Alpert Award-winning choreographer, writer, director, performer, and professor of choreography right here in the Department of World Arts and Culture's Dance. His dance theater company, Reality, performs work across the world that combines the accessibility, grit, and passion of African American traditional and pop cultures within the challenging compositional structures of avant-garde dance and theater to explore timely, socially charged, and often spiritual themes. These words, they hardly get at the power of his work. That was a choreographer to a choreographer. Thomas Bradbury is a distinguished professor of psychology at UCLA, where he has taught since 1990. He's also co-director of the UCLA Marriage Lab. Take note. A leading authority on the formation, development, deterioration, and repair of intimate relationships with his collaborators, he has published more than 200 research articles examining why some couples thrive while others falter. And right here, another dear friend and in many ways a mentor, a theater artist, playwright, and educator, Meryl Friedman is the director of education and special initiatives for the Center for the Art of Performance at UCLA. She programs and manages a diverse portfolio of arts education activities, artist residencies, and community art making while making art herself. And she involves over 20,000 participants on and off campus every year. Please join me in welcoming these four extraordinary colleagues. And by previous agreement, Massimo will begin and we'll take our seats.
A premise. I understand up to a certain point the cultural language of love, the bodily, perhaps, language of love, but I have no idea what love is. That's the premise. So if anybody knows, please, you tell me at the end. What I know and what I'm going to talk about is, in fact, the background, trying to ask and not answer because I cannot answer it, but at least pose this question, whether love, the way in which we think, not sexual desire, of course, but love from an emotional point of view, and again, as a bodily reaction to something that happens and we don't know exactly why it happens, whether it is part of our genetic code or whether, in fact, it is part of our cultural code. I think it is an important question. And in order to, but first of all, we know that the first questions on love were developed, were posited in Greece, in fact, through a long tradition which began clearly with Homer, but especially with one of the great poets of all times, one of the greatest poets, female poets of all time, and that poet is Sappho, of course. I have if we can put image number one, this is is a poem that was copied over and over again. Catullus, for example, takes this poem, changes a few things, makes it his own. The author of the Sublime, Pseudo-Longinus, considers this poem as the greatest example of sublimity. Let's read it. Is equal with the gods, that man who sits across from you, face to face, close enough to sip your voice's sweetness, and what excites my mind, your laughter glittering. So when I see you for a moment, my voice goes, my tongue freezes. Fire, delicate fire in the flesh, blind, stunned, the sound of thunder in my ears, shivering with sweat, cold tremors over the skin, I turn the color of that grass, and I am an inch from dying. Now, this poem was written by Sappho, as I said, a poetess from the town of Lesbos, in the town of the island of Lesbos, and we're talking about 600 approximately before the Common Era. Now, if we take the second image, now, this one is the Greek. Of course, for those of you who are interested, and it is, again, there are some extraordinary expressions here. Now, as I said, it is a poem. The passion of love in the poem is described as a force that overwhelms the mind and overwhelms the body. But the symptoms are described through the body itself. And in fact, it is through the body that large numbers of philosophers, beginning with Aristotle. By the way, Aristotle wrote a treatise on love called Erotikos, which was lost, and pieces have come down to us through Arabic cultures. So you remember that when the Arabs conquered Spain, they opened extraordinary centers of learning, and they invited people from the rest of Europe to go there and to study their culture. And this is where many of the treatises, medicine, for example, in the West was born through translations done especially in Toledo. And this treatise, parts of this treatise of Aristotle was found there. But there are many works, treatises on love, and all of them discuss love, beginning and ending with the body. That is to say, it is through the body and only through the body that we can understand love as a passion. Now, there is another, how can I say, tradition that will develop, of course, a little later, and it is the Christian tradition on love. But don't forget that the early fathers of the church relied profoundly on Greek culture in order to set the Gospels into an actual doctrine, into a system. And the early fathers of the church were extremely learned people. So behind there is, for example, the philosophy as a system of Plato and also that of Aristotle. Now, I want to bring the next image up. It is an image that comes from a 16th century medical book. It is half a person, as you can see, but concentrate on the brain and on what it says here. You have the heart at the bottom. On the right, you have tactus, which spreads throughout the body. And then you have auditus, which is the hearing. On the other side, you have the gustus, which is taste. And then you have visus, which is of course, sight. So what we have are the 5 external senses. But what about A, B, C, D, and E? Look, 1A, sensus commune, common sense. That is where the expression common sense comes from a part of the brain. B, fantasia, fantasy, of course. Then CD, cogitativa vel estimativa, the power of cogitation and that of estimation. D, imaginativa, the power of imagination. And E, memorativa, the power of memory. Now, this is the system that from ancient times all the way to the 1700s explains the act of perception, and hidden in the act of perception, the act of sensation, of feeling, of emotions. And this is where I will try to explain it. Now, it is a fairly complex system that I will try to simplify. And if I can simplify it and make myself clear, great. If not, well, I will simply apologize at the end. Okay, so, there is Aristotle said, and it is something that was repeated over and over again. And St. Thomas, by the way, brought it to the Latin West in his Summa Theologiae, the Sum of Theology. Aristotle said that no one can understand, perceive the world outside, make it part of one's experience, and therefore, distinguish oneself from the rest and identify oneself as a person, man or female, male or female, without, and the word he uses is phantasmata, without mnemonic images. That's what a phantasma is, a mnemonic image. What it means is that when I look at something, whether it is a person, a chair, a light, whatever, this piece of paper, an image from this piece of paper, from this chair, comes through the five senses, and especially sight, which is the most perfect of all the senses. This, by the way, is Plato who sets this rule. And this image from the external senses comes to my eyes, of course. I see, and if I close my eyes, I still have that image in my retina for a moment. That means that that image has come inside the front of my brain, the common sense. That's what the common sense is. It is the receptacle of everything that I see. As an image, of course. But clearly, that image that I see is still attached to the bodily object. What I'm trying to say is that if I see you, and I see you, and I see you, identify you as different people, but I have to come to the conclusion that you and you are human beings first, not female, male, young, less young, tall, and so forth. That is to say that that image that has come through my senses inside my brain, it has to be abstracted from the materiality in order to become an object of intellection, of course. And that happens through all those chambers. So that image moves from the common sense to the fantasia, to the cogitativa, and once it is there, the cogitativa, then it has been abstracted, so that if I see a lion, I don't say, kitty, kitty, come here. I have to be able to distinguish this. And at that point, I am able, by recognizing that object, of course, as the essence of the lion, of the chair, to recognize the entire category. Now, what if something goes wrong in this process? What if, for some reason, that image that comes inside my brain gets stuck, let's say, someplace? So, I see a person of the opposite sex. And all of, the discourse until modern time, contemporary time, has to do with opposite sex only, basically. So what if I do, and something happens to me? For some mysterious reason, I begin to feel all warm inside. I begin to perspire. I begin to see so-and-so, in a way what Sappho was describing in her poem. What if this happened? Well, the moment this happens, and that, by the way, can also work for fear and other emotions. At that very moment, I'm looking, you tell me when, I get, you think, when one speaks, one gets lost, you know that, and then who knows where one goes. Anyway, what happens is that the humors, which are the genetic parts of sensation, the 4 humors, which are at the basis of every life, according to ancient, medieval, and early modern psychology, let's say. These humors begin to stir inside. But the one that is the most dangerous humor of them all is the so-called black humor, or melancholy. Melancholy, is cold and dry. And, by the way, parenthesis, this is why until the 1700, everybody thought that English and Germans were much more intelligent, for example, than Italian or Spaniards, because they were cold. They lived in a cold weather, and of course, that meant that they must have had an excess of melancholy humor, and melancholy humor created also intelligence, while Italians and Spaniards were too emotional, they moved their arms all over, and passionate perhaps, but, to be considered at arm's length. Let's put it this way, okay? Now, what happens to the melancholic humor is that it starts moving, it goes to the brain, it is cold and dry. When it arrives there, it freezes the brain. And by the way, the brain was considered to be made of a kind of wax. And as you know, when you warm the wax, then you can put something there, a seal, for example, as it gets cold. And what happened in that case is that the image remains there, impressed. And that is obsession, of course, because at that point, all I can think, all that my mind can do is go back onto that image, which is part of my brain. So that is obsession. Do we have, is that? Let's look at this. Then, 2 images. The next one. This, by the way, is the way in which the way in which a young man was, you can read it, a young man was treated for excessive passion, love for a woman that he could not have. Look what the last, we found him not only insane, but so ill-treated from the various remedies of attending simple-minded women that I had never seen anything comparable. They had placed on his bare head a bronze device ordinarily used to warm the bed, so hot when lit that they burned the whole crown of his head. Why would they do that? Because if the image is frozen there because of the cold, by putting warmth around the brain, they warmed it, and so the image could fly away, could move away, could go to the next stage. They heard something, these women, about it, but they didn't know exactly what to do. A doctor would have known, and there were special ions to put right there that worked much better than the one that you use to warm the bed. The next one, very briefly. This is instead a young woman. She's, again, passionate. She loses her head because of her overwhelming passion, but in her case, she is placed in a torture house. It's called carneficina. And she is given, bloodletting time after time after time. They believe that that would solve every problem until torture house, carneficina, where after bloodletting, repeated 30 times in 6 days, he drew from the girl, along with her blood, at the same time, her insane mind, mad love, dear life. By the way, if you look a little higher up, a pungent, sticky, mucous humor, and so forth, that is a description of the devil. So she has become the devil, So, in a way, that's how you fall in love, but this is how a lot of people at the time thought you could fall out of love. That's all I know. Thank you.
Thank you, Massimo. We're going to, that was fantastic. We're going to join Massimo on stage, and I think, again, by agreement, Professor Bradbury.
Shall we sit?
Yes, let's sit.
Good.
Is going to bring his perspective on love.
Love is a capacity that we all possess that enables us to create and sustain substantial, important, meaningful bonds with other people. Love is also a feeling, as you heard in Massimo's poem from Sappho, a strong feeling about contentment, a feeling of warmth, a feeling of wanting to be with somebody and feeling relaxed in their presence. Love is also a need that we have, a kind of a yearning, a drive, a wanting, a hunger, like a hunger, to be with other people, to be close to other people. And we often think about that when we evaluate our relationships and we think about whether that need is being fulfilled for us, whether this person is meeting our needs. However we think about love, it's an internal experience. It's an idiosyncratic experience. It's a subjective experience. It's a deeply personal experience. Now that creates problems for scientists who really want to study that in a systematic way. But for artists, it's an entry point, a door into a vast territory that allows us to understand the subtleties and the nuances of this powerful emotion, and to understand people's stories, how they fall into love, how they fall out of love, the desperate things they do for love. And in fact, for many of us, we turn to TV shows and plays and poems and movies in order to understand, in order to give voice to these feelings that exist within us. That's not to say that scientists don't have something to offer when it comes to studying this invisible natural force that we call love. In fact, we study invisible natural forces all the time when we study things like gravity, which we can't see but has an effect, when we study things like the wind, which we can't see but has an effect, and we can do the same thing with love. We can say, love is that which love causes. Love is its consequences. And love has some very powerful consequences. When people do not have loving relationships in their lives, that is to say, when they're feeling lonely, when they're feeling isolated, when they're feeling abandoned, that is a devastating experience. Solitary confinement is one of the worst things that we can do to another person, to remove them from social contact with anybody else, right? So love is understandable by its consequences, and the absence of love is very painful. Painful for us as adults, debilitating for us when we're young children. And that's why so many of us are upset when we hear about children being separated from their families for immigration reasons, right? But the presence of love is a really good thing for us. The presence of love is the best predictor of our happiness in our lives. People who report having loving relationships, close confiding relationships, are people who enjoy better physical health, better mental health, who are more successful at school, they're more successful at work, they go on to raise happier and healthier children of their own. Now, if you're in love, or if you're in a relationship where you're feeling loved, that doesn't provide any guarantee that bad things aren't going to happen, right? You're still going to have midterms. You're still going to have a lousy commute. You're still going to have to pay the rent. You're still going to have to face a natural disaster from time to time. But love gives us a resource. It puts someone by our side who can help us out. And that might be literally true with a person who's with us, or it might be symbolically true, so that there's someone who matters to us that we can turn to psychologically, internally, that helps us through difficult times in our lives. Now, if it is the case that love has powerful consequences, and I believe that it does, then it begs the question of what are the upstream factors that cause love? What are the things that lead to love in somebody's life, in the experiences that they're having? Well, there's an evolutionary story to tell. We've evolved to be nurturing creatures, to be nurturing beings. Guess what? We're pretty good at that. And it's the perpetuation of our species demands that we're good at it. There's also a biological perspective on love, of where love comes from. The biological perspective would say that there are parts of our brain and systems within our body that enable us to be loving beings. that implement those feelings of love and allow us to feel those things and allow us to engage in those behaviors. And those are true. The psychological perspective on love goes to a different place, and it says that the way we understand what love is and what's upstream from love, what generates love in our lives, is interpersonal. Love is interpersonal. It's between us and another person, right? In order for me to feel love, I have to have an exchange of some kind with another person that leads me to feel a certain way. It's interpersonal. Love is between people. And once we realize that, we can start to say, well, what are those conversations about? How do those experiences get conveyed between people? Psychological scientists, people like me who study relationships, say the process begins with disclosure, with me telling you that there are things about me that I want you to know that are true about me, authentic about me, and maybe admit to some of my weaknesses and inadequacies. You need to know something about me that's true that I don't share with everybody else in my life in order for love to even have a hope of beginning to blossom between you and me. Now, that's not enough, right? A disclosure is not enough. We disclose to people all the time, and we don't fall in love with them, right? And a related point here is that this disclosure, this taking a risk, is necessary for us to fall in love. Because love isn't going to come free. Something this good isn't going to come for nothing. And we have to put something of ourselves out there in order to have love come back to us. Now, disclosure isn't enough, and in fact, psychological scientists believe that 3 other things are necessary in order for those disclosures to become the root of a loving relationship. The first of those 3 things is an understanding. If I disclose something to you and you understand that and you get that at a deep level, you understand my needs and my fears and my hopes and my dreams. Now, that might not be a good thing to talk about on the first date. I get that. But at some point in a conversation, that material has to come out, and that material has to be understood by you. You have to understand what I'm saying. You have to hear what I'm saying, not in a superficial way, but in a way that really connects me with you. Understanding's not enough. We understand a lot of people who we don't fall in love with, who we don't even like, much less fall in love with, right? The next thing that has to happen after I make this disclosure to you is that you have to validate that. You have to see value in who I am and what I'm about. You have to say, not only do I get you, I sort of understand what you're about, but I think you're good. You are a worthwhile person. This is good, what you're trying to do, what you've been through, how you've accomplished what you're accomplishing, what you strive to do in your life. Those are good things. I endorse that. I validate that. I accept you for who you are, and I see something really fantastic in that. But there's a third element too, and this may be the hardest criterion of all for us to fulfill. And that is for us to fall in love. I need to know that you deeply care about me. That when I am in trouble, when I am in an acute state of need, that you need to put your needs aside and respond to me. Caring is the final criterion following a disclosure. And that's why so many TV shows have scenes from hospitals. They have scenes from weddings. There are scenes where there's vulnerabilities, right? All of the transitions in our relationships involve understanding, validation, and caring. Either they go up or they go down, but the transitions in relationships always involve some deeper understanding or a misunderstanding, some validation or an invalidation and rejection, an effort to care for the other person or a failed attempt to care for the other person. And if you look closely at a movie or a TV show or a novel, you'll see that it's these experiences that either drive love forward or that thwart love. Now, this is a psychological perspective on love, and it affords no guarantee that this love is always going to be true. because love has to be maintained, right? People change. People change in ways that maybe we didn't anticipate at the beginning of our relationship. People do things that maybe shouldn't be validated. People's priorities change. People get so busy with other things in their lives, working difficult jobs, having all kinds of financial stresses and strains in their lives that make it really hard to stay connected with another person, right? So through no fault of our own, sometimes this process can deteriorate. But when relationships are going well, it always involves understanding, validation, and caring in some way or another. And when relationships are going poorly, it's restoring these processes through couples therapy, for example, that allows two people to set aside their differences, to understand how they've gotten off track, and to then find ways to care for each other in new ways. The polarizations that divide people can be dissolved, and they can come together in new ways. In fact, couples therapy, if it starts early enough in a couple experiencing distress in their relationships, can be very powerful and very effective. Now, I'm going to leave you with one last thought. I've emphasized this idea that love is an experience in me. It's a feeling that's in me. It's a need that's in me, a capacity that's in me. And as a result of some transactions and conversations that you and I might have, that feeling inside of me can grow. But there's another more profound kind of love. And that's the kind of love that allows us to acknowledge that, but also to recognize that other people have the same capacity that we do. Other people have this same need that we do. Other people have these same feelings that we do. They may be different. There may be subtle shadings that make them different. After all, this is a highly idiosyncratic, deeply personal process. And yet, through my actions, through the words that come out of my mouth, through my actions, my expressions of caring, I can enable someone else to reap all of the benefits that we know are inherent in our closest relationships. And that is true love. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Wait, what is true love? Could you say that again? Well, maybe we'll make you say it later.
I'm setting the stage. Hello. Come on, hello. There we go. I'm Meryl. And when Vic asked me to be here today and said the question this week is, what is love? I was so relieved that it wasn't what is truth or justice or citizenship. I thought, love, okay, love, I can do love. Love is easy. Everyone knows what love is, don't they? No. What? Love is? Love. What is love? Love can break your heart. It's the look. It's the crazy little thing. It's a silly little song. It will take you higher. It's like a rock. It will keep us together. It's a two-way street. It's tainted. It hurts. If you can't hurry it, it's a train. It falls. It's falling. It's a fool. It's fooling you. It's endless. It ain't for keeping. It's a whole lotta. It's the one. It's a touching and a squeezing. It feels like making some. It just calls to say it's all you need. Love is. I realized that after 2 days of thinking really hard, I didn't know what to say about it. My husband saw me fretting and said, "What's the trouble?" And I said, "I don't know how to answer the question, what is love?" And I realize now that might not have been the best thing to say to the adult person that I have spent my entire adult life with. But he took it in stride, and he said, I don't get what the big deal is. It's not that hard. Just say what you love. Okay? Okay. So, to be truthful, I got stuck because I thought that there were some things that I should say. But here's what I want to say. What I love is being in this room. I know this room intimately. Its sounds, its moods, its smell. I teach class in this theater once a week for 225 students, and I have been doing that for the past 6 or 7 years or so. I love this room, this theater. I love the theater, being in a theater, working in a theater. I work across the way in Royce Hall every day in all of its 1,800 seats of glory. I love everything about the theater. I love its endless possibility that anything can happen at any moment. When I was growing up, I only wanted to be 2 things, an artist and a teacher. Actually, that's not true. I wanted to be a third thing. I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I knew that I didn't have the stamina to be heartbroken all the time. For my 8th birthday, my parents took me to a big Broadway musical on Broadway. It was called South Pacific. And in it, the female lead washed her hair on stage. She actually soaped it up and washed her hair on stage. And she sang this song, I'm gonna wash that man right out of my hair. I'm gonna wash that man right out of my hair. I'm gonna wash that man right out of my hair and send him on his way. It made an indelible impression. And I fell in love. And not long after that, I did my own little rendition of that number in front of my grandmother and a bunch of her friends in my grandmother's kitchen. And when I was done, there was a very long pause. And everyone stared at me. And my mother said, shrugging, well, she's very artsy. And my grandmother looked at me, and she looked at my mother, and she took a very long drag of her cigarette. And she said, well, she doesn't get that from our side of the family. I was that. I was artsy. I am artsy. But being an artist is what I love. Art is how I find out about things. Art is what makes the unbearable bearable, even if just for a moment. Art is, I don't know, but I do know, and it's hard to say. Art is the joyous disruption of routine. It is shock and disbelief and sudden understanding. Art is your heart breaking with knowledge and unanswerable questions and laughing all at once with hundreds of people in the same room that you don't even know. Art is, I don't know, but I do know. I know that I love it. I love it and I want it all the time. Art is never forgetting that your family, who you love, is looking at you, aghast, and you're thinking, maybe you need to keep a little part of yourself hidden because others might not get it or get you. They might stop loving you. Art is the balance. It's the conflict between what you have inside and what you do outside. I think that art is about poking and testing that balance point to see what can happen, but always feeling a little off to one side. Art, like love, is not knowing and feeling okay about it. Art is hard. It's so damn hard. Even when it's working and everything is clicking and you feel the exhilaration, it's still so hard. Art is your parents and sometimes your teachers and even your friends saying, art? Really? Wow. I hope you have a backup plan. Oh, that was so hard to hear. Art is the cold when you can't pay the heating bill in a freezing city because you haven't worked in weeks. Art is travel and meeting other artists in a place that you've barely dreamt of, and yet you all speak the same language even when you don't. Art is teaching a room full of fourth grade kids that their creativity matters even when the system tells them that it doesn't. Once, a very long time ago, I walked down a Chicago street towards an elementary school. I was feeling rushed and preoccupied. I was running late. I was carrying bags filled with art supplies and thinking of everything. And then I heard my name, and I looked up. And this entire fourth grade class was hanging out from the third-story windows. They were a tumble of legs and hair and smiles, and they called my name and they said, "Hurry up! Where have you been? Hurry, hurry, we've been waiting for you." And I stopped and I waved back at them, and I just remember laughing, my breath, these white clouds in the cold air. And in that moment, I forgot the traffic and the cold afternoon and the missed moments of a long day. I forgot that after this time with them, I would go to another gig and I wouldn't get home until after midnight or later. And I took a deep breath and I picked up my bags and I ran up those stairs to be with them. Teaching for me, like art, is leaning forward. It is running up the stairs with bags. It is thinking and contemplating and putting together an idea from nothing for people that you know nothing about. It is a roller coaster in the dark. It is doors opening and closing. It is noisy and chaotic and shifting from foot to foot. It is squeaky seats and uncomfortable coughing and the occasional thundering silence of understanding. It is knowledge and deep uncertainty. It is reinventing the wheel every single time. I like to think that teaching is overcoming eye rolling. It is creating a space where stuff can happen. Teaching plus love can banish despair in a room full of strangers who somehow make a community. When we were kids, my brother and I would play school. I would make him. And he always let me be the teacher. I love that he did that. Here's what you said love is. That butterfly feeling. Faith, logic, peace, trust, acceptance, friends, family, clarity, humility, loyalty, justice, helping others, water, food, Disney, land, ice cream, bananas, apples, and grapes. Love is a neurochemical con job. Love is a universe all of its own. Love is oneness. Love is emptiness. Love is an action. Love is blind, irrational, painful, insane, necessary, healing. Love is an action. Love is the death of duty. Love is tragedy and beauty. Love is amorphous yet definitive. Love is something bringing people courage. Love is something I couldn't have because of my depression. Love is a feeling realized which gives way to choice. Love is a waterfall of sensation which rushes, drips, peaks and valleys, but never ceases to flow. Love is love. Love is knowing when to stop arguing with a little red heart after it. Love is a series of chemical reactions that make copulation more likely. Love is showing up for people you know as if each time you see them is the first time and you take them in with fresh eyes and listen with curiosity and share space openly. Love is my girlfriend and good grades. Love is the motivation to make it. Love is time and opportunity. Love is freedom. Love is security. Love is selfless and selfish. Love is a job. Love is a place to live. Love is God. Love is not safe. Love is the soul's recognition of its counterpoint in another. Love is my dog snoring next to me. Love is purpose, having one. Love is good cookies and cold milk. Love is unconditional. It's doing something without expecting anything in return. Love is the fuel and fire of life. Sometimes the universe aligns. I'm going to sing this one. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Thank you for sharing your words with me, and I loved being here.
Actually, even the stool. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm a little under the weather, so I may have to take a water break or two. Chapter 14, the present. When I was asked to be part of a talk on what is love, I felt like a total fraud. I'm a choreographer and I make dance, theater pieces, and films for my company, David Roussève Reality. Every piece I've ever made is about love, or deep loss, which is also about love, or the meaning of life, which is definitely about love. But I didn't know how to answer the question, what is love? Ergo, the fraud part. Chapter 1, November the 21st, 1959. A baby was born to African American and Creole parents in a segregated Herman Hospital in Houston, Texas. The doctor who delivered that baby was white, which was a miracle because that was unheard of in segregated Houston. Now, the white doctor may have been the best the city had to offer at the time, but he had not delivered a whole lot of black babies. So the baby came out yellow, which the doctor read as being seriously jaundiced, and pronounced that this infant was ill, probably with pneumonia, and so had to be left at the hospital and incubated for 5 days of antibiotic treatments. When the jaundice didn't clear up after 5 days, he then declared that the child seemed fine, so he released him to go home. Now, as the baby's mother would always in the story of that boy's birth, well, when I took him home, I realized, ain't nothing wrong with my baby. That doctor just didn't realize Creole babies come out yellow sometimes. I mean, sometimes it just takes a little bit of time for them to brown up. Now, the man who was that baby would become convinced that his bones can still remember beginning life alone in an incubator waiting to brown up. That man is convinced that starting life with 5 days devoid of anything similar to love led to a lifelong obsession around discovering the nature of love. Chapter 6, 1992. On stage, night. The sound of crickets chirping in the background. Lights rise dimly on an African-American female dancer wearing a timeless slip, doing oddly slow, expressionistic movements that capture a profound sense of intimacy. A strange, raspy voice that is later identified as the protagonist called Grandma begins. Everybody got something in life they loves more than theyselves. Back in Louisiana, back when I was young, I had my cousin Bonnie. She wasn't very pretty, had a temper like a snapping turtle's mouth on a coon man's ass. And worse yet, she was the blackest one of us all. So they'd give my Bonnie all the hardest cotton to pick. At the end of the day, in the high season time, her hands would run blood from snapping white cotton tops off of two dry twigs. If she was cut real bad, if she was hurting real hard, I'd take her out to hide behind the pig man's shack. I'd hold her hands flat, dig under her skin, and pull the cotton stickers out. Then I'd lick her bloody palms like they had precious sand candy in them. I'd blow real soft on top of my spit to cool, quiet her tears. I'd pull her body up to mine till her legs would wrap around my waist. And we'd just hold each other tight and rock in the light from the Louisiana moon and taste our tears as they'd roll down our faces and into each other's mouths. In 1992, I premiered a full evening work called Urban Scenes, Creole Dreams in New York. Urban Scenes juxtaposed the real-life stories of my Louisiana Creole grandmother in the early 1900s Bayou country, especially the tragic and violent loss of her own beloved cousin Bami to a rape, with my own autobiographical comical stories from contemporary urban gay African America to create a dialogue on the timelessness of loss and love, and the search for love and humanity by those who, at least socially, seem to have little right to demand either, became the very core of my body of work. Chapter 2, 1965. The boy sits by his window in a 2-story off-white house that his parents were able to afford because of a massive and very fast white flight from Houston's inner city to the suburbs. He's looking out the window with his elbows on the windowsill, arms long, hands cupped, face resting into his open palms, looking deep into the nighttime sky. But he's not counting the stars. He's looking for Peter Pan to appear amongst the stars. Fly down to that very windowsill, take his hand and fly him off into that very night. And it was Peter leaving the magic of the night for the mundane of the earth to release that boy from his loneliness that was the greatest act of love that this boy could possibly imagine. And so when Peter reached out his hand, it didn't mean come with me to Never Never Land. It meant I love you. And so the boy waited year after year. But he wasn't hoping Peter would come. He was believing that he would. Chapter 9, 2005. My second film and the first I directed myself. Bittersweet is the first work in a series of work exploring bittersweetness as a single moment when joy and agony are experienced together. Set in a time that looks 1940s-ish, but the date is never mentioned, the film follows an unnamed African-American Southern female protagonist, voiced by me and played on screen by dancer Taisha Paget, and her memories of 3 crucial moments in her existence. The first was beautiful Georgia Clifford, who as a child shot Sammy Boudreaux with a slingshot for cheating her at checkers, or simply for believing that he could. Georgia Clifford, we learned, disappeared by a lake 2 days after she was forced to marry the controlling man who owned it. Second was Miss Sally Mae Brown, the first woman I ever met who owned books and knew how to read them, and owned a kitchen but did not know how to use it. But that was before she married that evil-ass man from round yonder. That evil-ass man, we learned, was beating Sally Mae Brown. And the third was the love of her life, Rebecca. The greatest joy I have ever known was laying on my back with Rebecca by my side as we'd stare into the stars while crickets whispered the secrets of a better life to come. Rebecca allowed my heart the illusion that truly it was free. I thought bittersweet was about the nature of existence as one of bittersweetness, but it was really about the nature of love as one of bittersweetness. Georgia Clifford walks into a lake and drowns herself rather than submit to a man. Sally Mae Brown plunges a butcher knife into the heart of the husband when he hits her one time too many. Rebecca is near death and in immense pain. At her request, the protagonist squeezes her so tightly in her arms that Rebecca can no longer breathe and her heart stops beating. So the act of freeing Rebecca's spirit, even though she knows it will break her own. Love of self, love of freedom, love of another human being. Chapter 3, 1966, 1967. This one does not have a year because the boy doesn't really remember the actual year, only that he was like 7, maybe 8. That was when he was molested or raped by an older male cousin. But the story actually has a happy ending. That was when the boy discovered his superpower, disengagement. When bad things happen, he could just pull away from reality. Like viewing life, no, it was like experiencing life through the third person instead of the first. It's funny the man who was that boy thought, as removed as he was in life, it's how removed he was not in his art making. See, the boy eventually became a writer and a choreographer, and he made these searing, scorching pieces that were filled with humor and pathos and folklore and Southern mythology and biography and autobiography and emotion, and oh, did I mention emotion? Real, genuine emotion. It was like if his superpower in the real world was aloofness, his superpower in the stage world was presence. Chapter 12, January 2018. The sky is bedazzled with stars as the man sits on this deck in the hills of Sherman Oaks that overlook the whole valley. The man has just decided that after 26 years of marriage, he would step away and divorce his husband, who he loved very much. He's in the middle of making a piece about the life of out-gay jazz composer Billy Strayhorn, best known as Duke Ellington's main collaborator, and he wondered how the piece would be affected by the divorce. He moves to stand at the edge of the deck. He puts his elbows on the deck rail, arms long, hands cupped, and faces rests in his open palms, and he stares into the nighttime sky. And he searches for Peter Pan. He really searches. And then he abruptly stops. He kind of scared himself. I mean, he's 58 and he's looking for Peter Pan. But that wasn't really the scary part. The scary part was he believed more than anything that Peter Pan would come. Chapter 5, fall 1991. The man sits in the office of a very well-known AIDS doctor in New York City facing the doctor. When she asked, "So what brings you here today?" The man explained that he was in the office 2 weeks ago to have an HIV test and was there for the results. The doctor asked why he felt the need to be tested, and the man explained his sex life. A huge smile then beamed across the doctor's face as she pronounced, "Oh, you are so not HIV positive. I mean, it's theoretically possible, but that would be not like 1 in a million, that would be like 1 in a billion." Then she sprang to her feet and left the room to get the results. The doctor came back in after a bit more time than it takes to actually find the results, read them, and walk back in. And somehow the man thought it was actually endearing that she had to take time to prepare herself to deliver the results that the man knew in his heart she had seen. The surprise to the man was not when she said, "Well, the results were in fact positive, so we can set up an appointment to discuss treatment." I mean, that part the man's heart expected. The surprise was that she crossed the room, walked to her seat, and sat down without ever looking up from the results in the folder in her hand, which the man thought showed a certain amount of talent. I mean, to do that without bumping into a single piece of furniture. But the man also thought that that was okay, because like him, her superpower was disengagement. But delivering HIV test results, that was clearly her kryptonite. And in this moment, the man was very happy for his superpower. All he could think was 1 in a billion. Aren't my chances of winning lotto like 1 in a few hundred million? At least you can say I have luck. Chapter 10, 2009. After 5 years of development, a heart development because I was sick in the hospital when it started, I premiered my piece, Saudade. My second work exploring the notion of bittersweetness, Saudade is a one-act, evening-length work that combines Portuguese fado music, world dance, postmodern dance, a series of era-jumping monologues from Southern African-American characters, and elaborate set design and projected digital imagery. I performed a series of characters from Southern African America. The very last of the evening was a man in the hospital dying from AIDS-related complications. I spoke in a character voice like this so people would not mistake him for me. This man could feel it in his bones as he lay there in that hospital that he was truly, quickly, and irrevocably moving towards death, and that if he just gave up, he would die. I mean, truly die. So the man gave up because he did not want to live, and he was deeply satisfied. He picked up the clicker, turned on I Love Lucy, and he waited to die. But then the voice of the character slowly switched from that character to my very own. The new voice describes the door opening and his partner walking in. Smiling big this day with puffs under his eyes that told me that he'd been up all night worried and thinking about how he'd have to walk in smiling so I would never know. And in that moment, when I saw he was too much in love with me to let me know the truth, I was overwhelmed with disappointment because I knew right then that I could not die, since I could not give up, because now I had a reason to live. And in that very moment, I was devastated that I felt that sick and yet could not die, yet elated that I would get to go on living as long as living was in this man's arms. I peeked at my partner who was putting flowers in a vase, and I thought, well, I guess if I can't understand life, then it will have to be enough to simply know why I live it. I live for love. How terribly and wonderfully bittersweet. And that brings us back to where we began. Chapter 14, the present. Yes, I felt like a fraud when I was first asked to be on this panel, but then I realized I know how love makes you act, and my narratives tell you. I know how love makes you move, and my dances tell you. But those are all metaphors in both language and movement. Discovering your reason to live by looking to the eyes of your lover who walks into the hospital room when you have just decided to die, that is a literal, not a metaphor. And there's nothing like being on a path to certain death to teach you why you live. That's my life, not my choreography pretending to be my life. See, somewhere between Saudade, Stardust, and Halfway to Dawn, I lost my superpower. I disengaged from disengagement. So the real fraud was not in not knowing how to answer the question, what is love? It was in pretending that I could not. I know what love is. The man in that New York City doctor's office may not have understood why his 1 in a trillion luck came true, but I know why I have HIV disease. And the man in Saudade may not have understood while he was in the hospital dying of AIDS-related complications, but I knew why in 2004 I was in the hospital dying of AIDS-related complications. Whether it was all part of some grand spiritual master plan by the universe to propel me forward on my path of learning, or whether it was just dumb, shitty, bad luck, it was because it all brought me to that moment, that one single moment, when my then husband walked into my Cedars-Sinai hospital room and I discovered my reason to live. Which brings me to the answer to the question, what is love? Love is the reason to live. But when I had to discover one reason to open my mouth, suck in air, and continue to live, love was the only and simply the only reason that was good enough to do that. I'm divorced now from my then husband, and I've grown jaded about the possibility of finding a true, everlasting love in the age of Grindr. But I didn't say it was the existence of love that was the reason to live. No. Like your heart's true belief that Peter Pan will swoop down from the stars to fly you into paradise in spite of your brain's insistence that it never will be so. It is the belief in love that is the reason to live. Love of self, love of freedom, love of another, love of a doo-doo bug, love of a mangy-ass yellow-tailed dog. What is love? Love is the reason to live. Thanks, y'all.
I can't thank each of you enough for for what brought you here tonight. It's so very moving. And I think maybe the first thing to do, I want to be able to open this up to all of us, but I think it's a time for us to talk to one another, and maybe it's an opportunity to just talk about what we love about being here with one another. And yeah, just I invite you to do
that. What can you possibly say? It was amazing, you know. It was a joy listening to all of you, you know, and listening to your experiences. No, it was really, really amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have not perhaps learned exactly what love is, but certainly the many faces, you know, as a, how can I say? I can say love is this and this and this and this, but why? That's the issue, which I don't understand and I don't know. The why. So maybe you can tell me.
For me, I don't think we want an answer to that too soon. because it's the quest. If we knew, we wouldn't have, the performances that you just gave us. It's the questioning, it's the wondering, it's the searching that is so inspiring. I mean, if we had an answer, I think it'd be terrible. It's the pursuit of it that's so wonderful, and to hear what it means to so many different people and to have that expressed so brilliantly is overwhelming, I think.
I was struck by all the through lines for all four of us, that the sense of vulnerability, the sense of care, the location in the body, love as an illness, love as a joy, love as a blessing, love as a mental disease, love as a heart disease, love as a mental joy, love as a heart joy, how love makes you behave. And I thought, I can only answer questions through metaphors. But in fact, there were metaphors throughout the evening and behaviors that are described as a consequence of love, which is probably, I agree, the closest that we would get to understanding what is love.
Well, there's so much, but I think that for me, one of the most resonant things is this notion of disclosure and disengagement, and how both of those things are necessary at the same time, at different times. And that if you don't disclose, you can't open yourself up to be engaged, but yet you can't engage at that level all the time. So there it is. It's that balance again. It's that tipping point. That's all I got.
I found myself thinking that given our sort of historical location of the way love was understood, which sounds funny today, but wasn't funny at the time.
Not at all.
And the poetry that was written about love at a time when, well, I guess that was before we started doing the surgeries and so on. But I found myself thinking, well, okay, that was then, and this is now. And here are our poets and our to the degree that we can, our scientific understanding of this disease, this opportunity, this possibility, this reason for living. It's sort of like 21st century. These are our sciences and our poets. And 600 before the Common Era, these were our poets and our sciences.
And the questions are the same. The question is the same. And then you can explain it in different ways, but it is exactly the same. What is love?
What is. And somehow we find it, even though I was so thankful for you to break this down to some degree, and I thought this is really useful for me. But at the same time, we can't know, but it becomes the reason for living, for connecting. So, and the thing that drives you poets and choreographers and directors to make these things, David, you wrote that for this. Thank goodness you didn't stay home tonight. He's not feeling well. That also, for what? Why would you write that? Except for love.
We're waiting.
Well, it was also, because it was also a gift for us to really, I hadn't written in a long time, and I thought, I'd written anything in quite a while, and the last pieces that I wrote for my pieces, for the last bits of text that I wrote for stage works, were more factual than they were poetic. And I thought, once I sat down to write, I thought, oh, this is going to be awful because I can only write if I'm trying to discover what is love in the way that I used to write, which is a mixture of fact and personal and autobiographical and a little bit of hyperbole. And then I thought, wow, what a gift then, because I can rediscover. There's this really great piece by Toni Morrison who said, all life is fact and fiction and fantasy and spirituality all combined into one. So it was really a gift to us as well, and I took it as an opportunity to rediscover things.
Wait, fact, fiction, fantasy. I'll tell you what, because we want to leave lots of time for discussion with you all, let's take that 2-minute break. And what is the point of the break? It's to talk to someone else about love. I mean, you know, however you want to construct that. That was sort of a misjoke, right? Not fall in love with the person next to you, but talk about love so that we can have a discussion in 2 minutes. We have some time to come together to turn the theater into a room, to bridge this gulf, to speak about love. I just want to ask you all, as we engage our guests, if you will keep your question short. Thank you. Okay, do we already, okay, here we go.
Hi, I'm Allie. I really loved, this has been my favorite lecture so far, I'll say that first, but my question is for Professor Bradbury. I wanted to ask what advice you give or what you say to couples who maybe, for example, one partner struggles with an addiction or there's some sort of codependency involved, and do you think that sometimes people should walk away from true love?
I think people should walk away from true love sometimes, but I also think there are times when the language that we have and the wherewithal we have to understand the situation that we're in is inadequate. It's simply, we're not seeing things for whatever reason, or maybe it's being concealed, as we heard about a few minutes ago. And those are the times when you want to talk to somebody else who has that language and can help you to appreciate that language and to help you understand the situation that you're in so that you make good decisions and good choices. So relationships are hard. I mean, there was another current that went through what we talked about, that there are difficulties and challenges, that it's worthwhile, it's a valuable endeavor, but that we don't always understand everything that we're going through at the time. And sometimes we do need to talk to other people to find our way through, navigate these difficult situations. So I think there are times when we can and should leave true love, absolutely. But I think we also want to do that with the awareness of exactly what we're doing and the consequences of doing so. And sometimes a third party can be really valuable in doing so.
Other? I see somebody way up in the balcony. Next time, come sit down over here. I don't know, can we get the mic up there? Oh, sorry, there's somebody very close by. There, you go next.
So what I heard from each of you in a unique way was that love is a process of community. And I think in that sense, there's an exponential dimension to love. And so Dr. King talked about agape. And in that context, he said that justice is what love looks like in public. So could each of you or a couple of you kind of riff on that idea for a bit?
Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a shot at that. Justice is what love looks like in public. I had not heard that put that way before, but yes. I think that even, especially now in this very challenging cultural moment that we find ourselves in, that there isn't enough accountability for how we act in public. It's so easy, I think, to put things out there, whether you do it via, the interwebs, which is having its anniversary today, or any of the other myriad ways that we have to sail forth with what we think that we believe in and not take responsibility for it. That I think it's easy for that justice part to completely fall away and not exist. There's another saying that I do know that's not Dr. King, but which is funnily Kahlil Gibran, which is, love is work made visible. And for me, that kind of says it all, that if you're not doing what you're doing in public and for the public with the kind of visibility and accountability that is necessary, it's kind of like what you said earlier about oh, we wrote this for today. Yes, we did, because to be in front of people and have the privilege of saying what you think and what your idea is a privilege. And it's not only a gift that we give, but it's a gift that we get. Words are important. It's important what you say, and it's important to be accountable and responsible for what you say. And there's a certain amount of love in that, and fear, and double thinking and thinking twice, and am I saying the right thing, and crafting it over and over and over and over and over again, and not being cavalier about it. And I don't think there's enough of that. There isn't enough of that. I'll go out on a limb. There's none of it right now. There's damn none of it. And so if we don't, if we're meddling at the moment, if we're being loving meddlers, and we who have the privilege to do that are not being a role model for it at every opportunity, then we're missing an opportunity.
I also wonder if you might remind us your thoughts on true love, because it sounds to me like that also is a response to the notion of what love looks like in public justice.
That's right. The thought occurred to me as well, and I love this. I love this statement because our capacity to love other people doesn't stop at our front door, right? It can't stop there. It shouldn't stop there, and we have this capacity, and that is a gift. That is a remarkable thing that exists within us. And we make choices about how much we share that, how much that becomes part of the public discourse, how much that becomes part of the tone of our daily lives, whether that's a student you might meet in office hours or someone you might meet on the street who's a stranger who might be in distress in some way. And it's these small acts that I think create, through love, this more just society that allows a lot of people to have a voice and a lot of people to feel better about themselves, because justice serves the vulnerable. And they are expressing, because they can do nothing else, they're expressing their vulnerability to us all the time. Whether it's because they're living on the street, or it's because they're in a hospital with no one to take care of them, or many, many other reasons. So we have this capacity, and it's worth being reminded. It's worth hearing, lovely stories, lovely, takes on this phenomenon, this capacity we have, because it reminds us that we can address those problems, us as individuals, but us collectively, and rise above our own needs and try to meet the needs of others who are not yet as fortunate as we have been.
Sir, okay, there you go.
My
On the
name is-
balcony.
balcony here. My name is Lisa. First of all, thank you so very much for tackling this very complex, perennial question with such grace and courage. I kind of have two questions, but maybe one artsy and philosophical and one scientific. What is love not, in parentheses, especially now that it seems to be a little more diluted than before? And scientific question, recently, a couple of years ago, the broken heart went out of the poetics and became a real thing when they found out people do die from broken heart because of chemicals and enzymes. My question is for Dr. Ciavolella and Professor Bradbury. Was there something equivalent during medieval times when people died of broken heart? And Dr. Bradbury, if there's anything in your three prongs, which one would cause the enzymes of the broken heart?
By all means, I'll give you one example. In one of the stories written by Boccaccio in this book called Decameron, 100 Short Stories, there is a young man who is desperately in love with a young woman, but is compelled, because of his family and his work, to leave town. And as he comes back, he finds that the woman has got married to someone else. He goes to her, begs her to go away with him, and she refuses because, of course, she's married now. And so he enters in the room while she's asleep, puts himself next to her with his head next to her head, holds his breath, and dies. Dies of a broken heart, of course. And when you think of the expression broken heart, I mean, it comes from a somatization of love itself, of course, And the culture of the Western world is full of stories about people who die of a broken heart. And when surgery began, we're talking about the 1500, people like Vesalius and others, some of the surgeons went around looking to see whether, in fact, there were broken hearts, and to see if people could have died because of it. So the question is, yeah, the answer is yes. Sorry.
It's beautiful. Some of you may have read the play or seen the play called Angels in America by Tony Kushner. And I believe it's the preface to the book that says that the smallest unit of human existence is not the individual. That's how we tend to think about it. Certainly in psychology, that's how we think about humans as behavioral entities unto themselves. But he goes on to say that that's a fiction. The smallest unit is two people, because no one can exist without another person keeping an eye on them, whether they're infants or adults. And to me, this addresses the point you raise about the broken heart, because we can't lose sight of the interdependence that exists between us and another person. And so for something as powerful as that to happen, reveals this deep interconnection that we have with other people around us all the time. We also know from sociological studies, for example, that many of the phenomena that we think only exist within us as individuals really get spread through our social networks. Social networks are these, constellations, these clusters of important people who affect us in ways that we don't anticipate. And so it's dramatic to say that people can die of a broken heart, but I think it's a testimony to how we as evolved creatures demand and require and need other people in our lives to take care of us. And when that's abruptly taken from us, that our body responds in abrupt ways as well. That won't always be the case, obviously. Many of us adapt well to these difficult moments in our lives when someone leaves us or we leave someone else. But we're deeply interdependent with other people, and our bodies are tuned into this. So we should expect that our feelings and our moods and our attitudes and our behaviors are really a reflection of those of other people that surround us, and take that into account as we, go about our lives and hope to make the world a better place.
Wow.
And I'll take a stab at answering the first part of that question about what love is not.
Okay.
Because my first thought about what love is not, and speaking for myself, not from my university nor my department, because we're at a public university, I would say my first thought was that love is not Donald Trump. And the reason that I say that is because the question of justice as the kind of manifestation of social love proves that. In that, there's a process of dehumanization that needs to take place in order to deny justice. And so it has been argued by many great political theorists that you can't oppress people that you feel have a common humanity, and certainly not that you love. And so the whole question of returning love socially, and we've talked about the importance of personal love, and then there's also the importance of social love, which radiates from a personal love. And how you can end up with the leader of the country, who is not a person who, in my opinion, is operating from a place of love, and what the implications are there, is why I'm actually in theater. I was pre-law and majored in politics when I was young. And
Younger.
Younger. And the reason that I chose theater was when I realized that, actually, theater has the great ability to allow the viewer to see the other as himself. It creates links of humanity. As in, there could be, the reason that I decided to make pieces about my grandmother was, as a woman and a woman of color, she was about and as poor as you can possibly be. She was as far from the average viewer of avant-garde theater and dance as one could imagine. And so I thought if I could make those links of empathy, which then eventually, if they're continued, can become links of love, it would become impossible for this denial of humanity and therefore justice to occur. And so the main things that I see as a lack of love right now are on a grander scale. But they radiate out from very small links of love that have been destroyed. And that's actually why I'm in theater.
Well, you took care of that one. Okay. I think we have time for a couple of more questions. I mean, I can't believe that we don't have, questions about love. Here they are. Okay.
I have the mic.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. So we talked about falling in love with another. I'm curious to know kind of the process of falling in love with artwork or your own projects, because what does that feel like from an artist's perspective of falling in love with a thing or material, an object, a performance?
Okay, let's keep these short and so we can get to those other ones as well. All right, good, go for it.
Well, as David knows, I would say probably everybody here knows, you have this thing that's in your head and it's in your heart, and you love it. And then as soon as you collaborate and the other person walks into the space, or the other however many people walk into the space, it isn't what you thought you were in love with anymore. It takes on another life of its own. And every other single collaborator that walks in to give that thing love, to make it go away from you like your child, is a part of that process. And so it's complicated. And you don't love it any less. But for me, you have to allow it to let you know how to love it, because there's other people involved, which hopefully makes it stronger, and you have to allow that process to happen.
could I just turn that question to Massimo, because in your love of, I don't know what, of the early literature.
Of literature.
Okay, literature
Of literature.
itself.
Of literature.
Okay, so what's that love about?
It is through the study of literature that I do not only try and somehow manage to understand others, but I manage to understand myself. It gives me a mirror to the world and a mirror to myself, of course. Much better than the mirror that I can get by making a selfie of myself.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, bumping up, right, there we go.
Okay. Hello. So we've all heard that you cannot love yourself, you cannot love someone else unless you truly love yourself. Do you think that is true? Do you need to love inward before you can express it outward? Or is love without it just as valid as love with it?
Great. You guys are on the...
It's a good question. I don't know the answer, but I would say, doesn't stop me from talking. I would say that love is best understood over time and developmentally. So to talk about the status of how you love yourself at one point in time relative to how much you might love another person, that takes a very tiny slice of time, and it underestimates the two trajectories that the two people might be on and their ability to influence one another. So I do think that someone who maybe by virtue of their background or the way that they were raised, maybe doesn't have a complete capacity to appreciate who they are and what they're about. But through their interactions with another person, which can be very loving, they can come to experience that other person's love themselves. So I would say, yes, we can love another person without fully loving ourselves, but ultimately, it's a developmental process. It unfolds over time in complicated ways, and that appreciating the development is really more important than sort of emphasizing a snapshot at a single moment in time.
Okay, we're going to jump to, there was somebody right there. He's got the mic. Fabulous.
My question was, we heard first about the conditions that are conducive to love, and then secondly, from the audience, there was this notion of agape love, which is love that is without condition. So I was wondering if you would respond real quickly to your thoughts on loving somebody who doesn't love you back, or perhaps love that has no conditions.
I feel like I'm going to jump in there because, again, I think it goes back to the comment that you made about true love. Loving without condition, then, is to love without needing to have that love returned, right? There's not, didn't you say something like that?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
I think we often love people who don't love us back. I think there is a primitive sense in which children love their parents, in a powerful sense, an evolved capacity that children have to do that. And we as parents want to believe we're getting love back, and I think eventually we do most of the time. But that feels unconditional for a long time, and that we have to feel the power, in this case, of parenthood or adopting a child or taking care of someone who's in a vulnerable state. That feels unconditional to me, and it's overwhelmingly powerful. And I think it allows us to, again, eventually develop a relationship that becomes reciprocated, but maybe still unconditional. So I think we do engage in that kind of love all the time.
Do others of you want to respond to that? You don't need to.
No.
We're just about out of time here, and I wonder if there are anything that you want to say before we close this out. I'm so struck, as usual, by the risk that you've all taken to be here, to sit with one another with your various particular histories and areas of knowledge, and to not know together. So that feels like a very loving thing to do. But last words? Last words?
Yeah.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.